You nail the interview.
I nailed the interview, like 100%. Like they asked exactly the stuff that he was asked, right?
So earlier on, you're upset that people at George Brown are cheating.
And it's paying off for me in the end, I suppose.
It's paying off in dividends. First question is always, tell me your first memory of technology. Where did you start in this story?
I mean, if I want to go all the way back, and I have to admit, after watching the podcast, this is actually something I've been thinking about quite a bit the last little while. I would say like it wasn't even really computer based. Like I often hear stories about people who got into IT and stuff like that, and they're working on like Apple IIs or whatever, like those early computer versions were. And I didn't really actually have my first computer until I was probably must have been like grade 7 or 8 or something like that.
Okay.
But I always was a huge fan of electronics. So like my first sort of like experience was like, playing with like stereo equipment, because my dad had a lot of that kind of stuff, and, hooking up the VCR to the TV and all the inputs and the outputs and stuff like that. So that was really what kicked me off to things. That and video games, I would say. Of course,
and video. Yeah, I think video games is super common. Everybody so far except Arthur has video games as their first one, and he was anyways. So okay, so you said you were about grade 6 or 7 when you had your first computer.
Yeah, it was and I remember it very, very clearly. It was a 386 DX2 with 4 megabytes of RAM. I remember that computer very, very fondly. I remember it came preloaded with a bunch of games. It had Hugo's House of Horrors. I don't know if you remember those games.
I don't know that one, but like, if you're a 386, that's probably like the Commander Keen and Monkey Island days, right? Yeah. So I remember that. And so grade 6 or 7, you're playing video games. Are you getting into like, you've got to manage the batch files too?
Yes, actually. Yeah. So you had to always, optimize your startup, because you only had that, very, very precious 4 megabytes of memory you had to get everything into.
Yeah.
So playing around the config.sys file, the audio.exe bat file, that kind of stuff. And actually on that, I think may have been when I first sort of got my first kind of exposure to programming.
Okay.
Because I remember inside those batch files, you could actually do a lot of stuff that maybe not was like terribly like apparent. Like looking back, like now that we do, use tools like Bash and whatnot, like, like the terminal is a very flexible thing that you can do lots of stuff in it.
Yeah.
And I remember making this like dancing game of some sort where I would like draw out like this big ASCII like person kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it prompted you to say, what your next move was, and then have another frame of like the dancing person. I always thought that really was cool. I thought that was really, really cool at the time.
I think that's really cool now, especially if you're like a 12 or 13-year-old kid doing this, right? Like that's some advanced stuff. So when did we move from that to formal education? Was it high school started right away, or?
Well, so between then, like at that point I was sort of exposed to the internet. Like we did get, dial-up internet for a while. And
okay.
I did remember playing around with like Angel Fire websites. I don't know if you remember that. It's been discontinued since then. But I think that was sort of my first exposure and love of the internet, was just like building HTML and stuff like that. It was super simple back then. It was just like center tags. Yeah. All the kinds of things you're not supposed to do anymore. Yeah. The blink tag, that kind of stuff. Tag. Yeah. Always thought that was super, super fun. Yeah. But as far as like the education goes, like high school, one of the previous guests, they mentioned touring. I hadn't heard that in a while. I actually found my touring book that I actually still have.
Nice.
But I thought that was, it was a very, very easy sort of, easy to get into language kind of thing. And you could do some, you could do some interesting stuff. You were kind of boxed into just sort of running it inside that pre-built IDE they had, unfortunately. But, So I thought it was super cool.
Yeah, I did Smalltalk in university, where they had this thing that everything was built into the Smalltalk IDE. So I imagine touring might have been somewhat like that, where it runs only in its own REPL, and you can't really get it out of.
Yeah, you can't compile into an exe or anything like that to try and run it outside of it. Yeah, that was it was kind of frustrating actually for a very long time that you couldn't build something out of it or anything like
that. I mean, I kind of want to see that batch file game you had, though.
Unfortunately, it's gone to the depths of time at this point.
I'm sure. Okay. And so through high school, was there anything particularly interesting that you would call out as a learning, or should we start talking about how you moved from there into university?
Well, so I mean, I there was a couple. I think there was like it was maybe grade 12 in OAC computer science, and basically all was touring the entire way through. We never got anything more than that. And so after that, I didn't actually jump to like a higher education program for a little while after that. So I did a lot of at the time I was really into like philosophy and just thinking about stuff. So I didn't immediately jump to doing, computer science or anything like that. And to add to that, my grades in high school were not exactly the best. So I kind of had this feeling that even if I was to apply to something like computer science, my chances of getting in were actually pretty slim.
Right. So how was your math then? You weren't sitting around doing like the calculus for fun or the...
No. Well, no. I mean, I was always good at math. Like, I wouldn't say I would have maybe excelled in university when you start getting into like the real math or anything like that. But I was good at that. I was just not the best at doing the homework and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
So,
When I was a high school teacher, we had these we had a whole spectrum of kids, but there were some real archetypes. And one of the archetypes that would repeatedly show up was the super smart kid who could get anything just like that. You'd say something, but they were so bored out of their mind that they didn't bother doing any of the extra work, and they just sort of skated by. Would you say that you would fit close to that archetype, or were you?
Possibly. At least I would like to think that was the case. Whether that actually was the case, hard to say. Like I did, I took like the Ontario math or like a Waterloo math contest a bunch of times, I believe. And I didn't do terrible on it. So I like to, like I said, I like to think I'm pretty good at math, but just the marks weren't going to let me get into university on a computer science. I think.
On a computer science. So, but you did go to university.
So like I said, I had that interest in philosophy at the time. So I applied to Carleton, went there for a year for philosophy. And it was great. Actually, I loved it. But I started to realize just as I was going through it that, what are my career opportunities as a philosopher exactly?
Right.
It's not exactly something that, many employers are looking for. Although I heard, you hear about, you get an art degree, it's something, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
But I decided as I was getting closer to the end of the first year that, I should probably try switching over to computer science or something like that.
Okay.
I also heard the joke, and I love telling this joke, is that what's the difference between a large pizza and a philosophy professor? A large pizza can feed a family of 4. So that was another good reason to switch over.
Yeah. You know what's really funny, and I'm not sure how true this is, but I once read that philosophy degrees are among the highest earning degrees that you can possibly get based on the average salary. And it's because so many of these, in theory, so many of these rich kids who are going to skate right into a CEO position after a couple of years, they frig off and they get themselves a philosophy degree, and then dad gives them a job as a CEO of the thing. And so
and to be honest, I was really sad because I really loved the subject matter. Like it was all like philosophy of mind and stuff like that. It was great stuff, but I just felt like I was just shoveling money into the fire basically.
Sure. No, if you don't have the connection to go straight to CEO out of university,
that wasn't going to happen.
You're not going to get it. So then you moved into computer science, and was that still at Carleton or somewhere else?
So I applied at Carleton, and I assume again because of my poor grades, they rejected me. So that was a little unfortunate. Okay. So just due to personal reasons at the time, I had a girlfriend in Toronto. Yep. So I was like, you know what, let's see what some of the schools are offering in Toronto kind of thing. So I ended up applying to George Brown
Okay.
For a program they had, a computer programmer analyst.
Right.
And decided to give that a shot.
Okay.
And they did accept me, which was fantastic.
that's how I got into. That's how I chose Carleton as well. I got all of these rejection letters, and then I got one acceptance. So
exactly.
Okay, I guess I'm going to Carleton. Yeah. But okay, so George Brown, what are you picking up? What is that like? So this is a college course. We are in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, this would be early 2000s. I believe. Yeah, like it was 2001. I think is when my first year there.
Yeah.
So George Brown, it had its ups and downs. I would say. I did take away some good things from my time there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I would say they weren't as diligent as I would think they should be about like things like cheating and whatnot. They felt like there was a lot of other students that, they were just skating by and not doing the work all the time. And since I was actually doing something that I was, kind of interested in for the first time, I was actually putting the effort towards it, which was super fantastic. Like we actually did things like it was all .NET there, actually.
Oh, wow.
So that was like my early exposure to .NET that I had not
touched. Wait a second. You started in .NET in 2000, which I understand it was a different landscape at the time. But then you chose PHP later on?
I did.
Wow. Okay.
We'll get into
that. Why, that's really, I think I'm really excited to hear about your PHP take, but I love .NET so much, and so it's strange.
So I've heard that has come out in the podcast, I will say.
Yeah. So okay, so you started in .NET, and you're learning George Brown. Is there anything else that's really stand out, or should we move into your first job?
Just the concept of databases. That was the other one big thing that really just took hold of me for a long time. Like it just made so much sense in my head. For the longest time, I would try and build these flat files and just parse out data myself. And just this whole concept of select something from something, where something else, limited by this other thing. It just made so much sense to me. That was the other one really, really big thing for me that I got out of that.
That you got out of that because you had previously been struggling to figure out, how do I get this data? And then all of a sudden you can just wait, there's a whole language for this.
Yeah, exactly. People have built these platforms. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like in hindsight, again, it was obvious, but it was at the time, it was such a light bulb went off in my head that
I know. I was doing Excel spreadsheet stuff around a few years before that. And we were trying, we were trying to manage like 130,000 records in a spreadsheet. And at some point somebody said, go to a database course and figure this stuff out. And that was it really is game changing when you start with that, especially going from this hacky version. Okay, so we move then into, you've graduated George Brown, right? And you start looking for work. Did you get something right away? Where did you go?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
So I was kind of fortunate at the time. So before I get into how I got my first job, I moved to Toronto. I had a roommate at the time. He was quite a bit older than me. He was probably 10, 15 years older than me. And his dad had owned like a small computer shop in Grey Bruce, sort of that area of Ontario kind of thing.
Okay.
And, while I was living with him, since he was sort of like the son of the guy that owned a computer shop, he had done odd jobs kind of thing for people. So someone needed a website, he would help out with it kind of thing. And me, fortunately living with him and, us, going to the same school together and whatnot, he's sort of a couple of times like, hey, Shane, you want to help me out with this kind of stuff. So for a little while before I actually got my first job, we were trying to there was a few small projects that, we did together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that being the preface, so I graduated and I probably sent out 200-300 resumes.
Right.
I didn't get a single callback or anything.
Yeah.
It was very, very depressing, I would say. I've graduated, great.
Yeah.
You hear that there's, everybody, you want to get this job in an IT company, you're going to make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be lots of people hiring, and I didn't get anything back.
Yeah. So George Brown is so this is about 2003, I'm guessing, right?
Yep.
And the .com crash was 2000, 2001.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It was definitely a little bit after that. I just don't think like everybody was just looking for people with experience. I mean, I know me now. Like I've looked at lots of resumes, at this point in my life, and if somebody has no experience on it, and you have like a million other people that do have experience,
right?
It's hard to justify, going with that person that has no experience, right?
It has, yeah.
So it didn't matter. I could have said I was the next Bill Gates, but they're not gonna. Why would they give me a chance when there's somebody else that is clearly more qualified, right?
Somebody who's been doing it for a few years, right? Yeah. But do you look at boot campers in your? This is an aside, but do you look at boot campers in your hiring process?
I mean, it's better than no experience. That is for sure, right? But I mean, still, like, actual work experience is always going to be better than anything else when it comes down to it.
Okay. Anyways, we'll maybe talk a little more about the hiring process, because I think that's something that a lot of people would be interested to hear from a hiring manager's perspective. So, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So again, I mentioned that I had that roommate, right? So he had graduated with me. He was also sending out lots of resumes, but he had the added bonus of having worked on projects. He could, he worked at his dad's computer company. He had something on his resume. So he also sent out a lot of resumes. He also did not get any calls back, but he did get one call back from a company out in Markham, and he went for an interview. And he thought it went okay. But when he was there, they asked, hey, do you know anybody else that may be interested?
Okay.
And he's like, oh, I got this roommate. He would definitely be interested, kind of thing. So, he comes back and tells me about this. He tells me, everything he was asked in the interview.
Yeah.
So I go in there and I know what they're going to ask.
You nail the interview.
I nailed the interview, like 100%. Like they asked exactly the stuff that he was asked, right?
So earlier on, you're upset that people at George Brown are cheating.
And it's paying off for me in the end, I suppose.
It's paying off in dividends. That's good.
And this is to this day, I feel terrible with this. He did not get the job.
He didn't get it, and you did.
I did get the job.
Yeah.
Felt really, really bad about that, but he's went off and been successful in its own right. So good for you.
Yeah, worked out. I hope. Okay. So what were you doing? Yeah.
So this was so this would have been the job before we worked together.
Right.
It was an affiliate network. At the
time,
I believe it was the largest affiliate network. And it was PHP is the language that they use there. Yeah. And I would say, since up till now, they didn't teach me any PHP in school.
Yeah.
All the PHP I had done was sort of like on my own time. Like I didn't really again, beyond my other complaints about George Brown, I would say that in retrospect, there's a lot of things that I didn't get taught that I kind of would have thought that I would have got taught in school. Like I didn't know about just code versioning. Like it was not even a concept in my head.
Right. And
I remember so clearly going into work that first day. And the manager at the time was like sitting me down. He's like, oh, we got to get you set up on SVN, bring up a terminal and do this kind of stuff. And at the time, I had never touched that kind of stuff. My most previous experience with the terminal was probably using DOS, like years and years and years ago. So I felt so bad, but I remember him like walking me through like the exact commands I had to use to like get set up on Subversion to get the code repository running. But once I don't know what happened, but just that experience just like opened my mind to like so many possibilities. So that's why I started working with PHP.
Right.
I was working on it was a framework that they had built in-house. Yep. And I'm not sure. I mean, this is a long time ago. But like the framework that I used quite a bit at the company we worked at, it was heavily based on what they had done there. Actually. Yeah. got to,
and I thought you based it on Zen, the Zen framework.
I mean, it was MVC framework, right? So, I mean, similarities to many frameworks at the time kind of thing, but it was mostly based off that first company I worked at. And I still remember that the first thing that they had me work on was the click code, basically, which was when somebody clicked on one of those affiliate links, it would be my code that took you to, the end result kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this is my first job, and I'm put on like the one piece of code that is like the most important kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like all the traffic is going through this thing. So, but I just learned so much from it because like, learn so much about like the HTTP protocol. You learn about cookies, like all of like the lead tracking stuff and how that was sort of done at the time, all that kind of stuff. So it was such a good experience. Like it was easily really and made me fall in love with PHP too, because I felt like it was so easy to do just about anything with it.
Sure. Well, I find so my first real language was Perl, and it's funny. I find that any language that is directly responsible for giving you a lot of money is a great language. And I love Perl because I got a lot of money out of Perl. Well, at the time, this was the 90s. And so it was, I think it was $20 an hour, but that was pretty good in the late 90s. So at the time you're working on the click code, the central, most important, because if this is an ad network, clicking on an ad, that's where they get their money. Yep. How were you aware of things like time complexity at that time, or?
Probably not. I mean, to me, like just, raw execution time, that's what mattered more than anything else. I wasn't thinking on sort of like any sort of more complex level, and that just how's the quickest we can get this to execute, while at the same time making sure that we can execute all the relevant rules that are required to send it to those destinations, because there's all the geo tracking and this offer is down, you just send it to this other one, all those kinds of rules.
Okay, so and really that's just around benchmarking and things around that, and you just say cut out a millisecond. Get out,
exactly.
Cut another millisecond. Do whatever you can. Okay. And how long were you doing that before you?
So it seemed at the time that I felt like I was there for like years and years and years. But like when I look back, I was only there for about like maybe 2 years. I think it was. And this was like the largest affiliate network at the time, and to this day, it's by far the largest company I'd ever worked at. They were probably, I think when I left, they were around 200 employees or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was there for a couple of years, and I just felt as time went on, like, I'm this, regardless of me doing a good job or not at this company, I feel like a very small fish in a big pond kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, eventually, somebody who was at the company, they ended up leaving and went to the company that we had worked at.
Yeah.
And at one point, I guess he thought I was a good developer. So it was like, hey, Shane, would you like to try something else? So I decided, yeah, why not? Let's do it.
Okay.
And also, I mean, so this company was in Markham as well. And I've always lived downtown. And this potential job I was going to work at was also downtown. So that was also
the downtown core. Yeah.
That was another huge reason, that because it was an hour and a half one way to get to the office every day. So that was just brutal.
What would you do on those trips?
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading. And so,
but it was my first job though, right? So
sure. You're gonna take, you're gonna do what you're gonna do, and you don't know it. You don't know any better in terms of quality of life and stuff.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's just the way it is. It's funny. It's funny. One of the things that I picked up from Jordan in a previous interview was just how much he reads on topics. He just continually buys high-end like computer science textbooks, and he's just flipping through on his commute back and forth. And it was like, mind-blowing. I bought a stack of books out of that interview because I'm like, I should be better at this. So
well, it was mostly fantasy novels and sci-fi I was reading.
Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a good one. Anyways, okay, so you move on to the next shop. You'd really fallen in love with PHP in terms of it's what were the features of PHP that you are let's have an ode to PHP. What do you like about it?
So the big one, and I don't think I necessarily realized a lot of these things at the time, but just the way that PHP is built, especially if you come from like obviously I didn't, but if you have like a C background or just like a Linux background in general, a lot of the modules within PHP are just like ripped straight from C, right?
Yeah.
So, if you know like curl as an example, if you know curl in using it from the command line in like a bash or something like that, you'll have no problem using it in PHP because like everything is literally exactly the same. Maybe some of like the flags for stuff are slightly different. Curl is the one that really jumps to my head that's like that, but I know there's lots of other modules where a lot of the string functions, as an example, the reason why the parameters, and I know people complained about this like ad nauseum. I never really thought it was that big of an issue. But how like some of the string functions, the order of the parameters you'd think would be in a consistent manner, but they clearly are not.
Yeah.
It's just because that's the way the C functions use, and it's just calling those C functions directly kind of thing.
Okay.
So it was just like, it's not much of a jump from somebody who has, a lot of experience using Linux. At the time, like I said, I just wanted my first job. PHP seemed like pretty easy to use. So I didn't, realize a lot of these things till later, but you didn't have to do a lot of things like, including third-party dependencies for a lot of the stuff you would want to do.
Right.
That's changed quite a bit now, I would say, with PHP, but at the time, you just never really had to do anything like that. If you're including an external file, it was probably one of your own files you're having to include.
Right. I find it's because it's not really typed at all. Everything you just throw it on to the variable as it's it's another key on the hash, and you just keep going. And I find if you're doing sort of workhorse stuff, just get it done. You just crank it out, and
exactly.
Yeah. And so I do find that I used to appreciate that more, but as I've developed more, I am a bit more into the strongly typed stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much you've kept up on PHP, but that has changed significantly at this point. You can be as strongly typed as you feel like being, which is it's better. It's nice to have those options if you're working in a context that type safety is very, very important kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you can still just use throw anything on the table you want and you're good to go. Like, I would say one of the reasons why I continue to use PHP a lot to this day is more like on the scripting side of things.
Yeah.
Like if I need to build like a script that's going to just do like some parsing of some data or something like that,
right.
My go-to is like always PHP, just because it has all those built-in functions. I don't need to worry about including any libraries, and I can just like go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I would absolutely say is entirely different from the .NET stuff, because if you're going to do a .NET scripting thing, you're already in trouble. You're already in trouble from the start. Like, you've got to be, it is not just like type some stuff and run it. Like, it's a much bigger effort than that. So here we are. You work in the affiliate space. You jump across when a buddy gets your, he pulls you along, he poaches you into the new place. Now, when we met, you were the CTO. Did you go straight to a CTO job, or
no? So there's a bit of a story to that. So at the time, it was a very small company. It was me, the guy who had brought me over, and basically the two business guys. You know them, the same people it was at the end there.
Yeah.
Or at least when I was there. So, we were, working on stuff. It was going great. Very early on, I thought it was nothing at the time, but I did something that just like wowed them. It was, you remember there was a lot of those offers where it was like get custom cursors and icons and stuff like that. And I was able to like extract all of the icons just because I found it was using a very regular URL path. It was like, 12345.bmp or something like that. You can just download them all. And he wanted to use that to like build some cool landing page or something like that. And I just remember that just blew his mind. And I think from that point, they were sort of in love with me, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
As far as becoming this, so at the time I was just PHP developer. I mean, I didn't really have a title per se or anything like that. I mean, the company was so small, it didn't really matter.
4 guys, one of us is going to be a CTO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was there for a while, and actually that guy that had brought me to that company had actually left for another one.
Okay.
And so it was just me, the developer.
So you got to be CTO by being the only other guy in the room.
Not quite yet.
Okay.
Not quite yet to that yet. So so that guy who left, he went to another place, and he again said, called me up. He's like, "Hey, Shane." I mean, obviously he knows. I mean, he's brought me to one company already. He obviously thinks I know what I'm doing. So he calls me up, asked me to go work for this new company he's at, and I wasn't so sure because I did like this very small atmosphere company I was at. It's definitely where I fell in love with working at like a startup type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he asked me again if I'd like to go over. So I went over for the interview. I didn't give them a hard yes, but I said, I trust this guy. It seemed like a good place to work. So I was like, it was also a small startup at the time. So I was like, all right, sure, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I did so, and I went to our boss at the time and told him, sorry, but I think I'm going to leave. Yeah. And he gave me an offer I could not refuse to stay on.
Right.
Along with, you can have whatever title you want, Shane.
Sure.
So,
okay.
So I decided, hey, I would like the CTO title because that sounds like a very, cool title to have that every technology person would want to have, right?
Right.
So that is how I became a CTO, and I still have boxes and boxes of business cards. I don't ever think I gave a single one out to except my family.
Right. Okay. And so you effectively pirated a stack of icons.
Yeah.
And this was so cool that they had to keep you on.
Well, I mean, they would have had no other developer.
I mean, they would have had no other developer. They needed you around. So what are you comfortable sharing any more details about this offer you couldn't refuse? Was there equity, profit sharing? What kind of?
It was a stack of cash, basically. Just like straight up bonus. He might have given me a raise too at the time. I can't remember. Still at the time, I was still pretty early on in my career. I was very happy with how much I was making. Like even a couple of years ago, I still had I was having to live with a roommate. I was making nothing, and then all of a sudden I'm working in the IT world. I felt I was being compensated very well, and I was very happy doing something that I loved to be doing. Right.
Yeah, and the money was. And so you were already getting what you thought was good money. And he said, what if I give you more than that? And you stuck around. So tell me the story about growing from 3 people to it was 40 at one point. And then I don't know how big it eventually got. I think I left around 40 people.
Well, so I would say, and this is where I started to get into a little trouble, and it's sort of the dilemma I started to have in my career for a very, very long time. I still do to this day a little bit, is that, I decided to take on that mantle of CTO, right?
Yeah.
Which sort of implied, I think my mind has changed on this a little bit since working at a few other companies, but it sort of implied to me that I need to be more than a technology person. I need to be a people person as well, right? And I would say that is not in my wheelhouse naturally, I would say.
Right.
So, but, we were doing very well. We need to hire people. We need to build a technology department. As much as I loved working like all the time, like, I would go home and work on this stuff because I thought it was very, very exciting what we were doing at the time. but we just, we need more hands on keyboards kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I actually reached out to a couple people at that first company I had worked at, and brought them on board. That was not so many names, but two of the long-standing people that were at the company we had worked at. And we just started to grow from there. And I feel like it happened in a flash, but like we moved into that bigger office.
Yeah.
And we felt like overnight, like just like filled the place up with people.
That's right. Because you commented about your, how you've struggled between the management side and the individual contributor side. And what are your thoughts on that now? And I guess maybe what were your thoughts at the time, if it's relevant, right? So I mean, and at least the feedback I continue to get back, I've gotten at all my jobs at that point is that I seem to really know what I'm doing. I can do things fast. I do a good job. Everybody's always happy. So, but I've become the CTO person, and we're hiring a bunch of these other people. It's difficult for me to continue to do that because I can't just be always thinking about what I need to be doing. I need to be thinking about what all these other people need to be doing, and make sure they have proper direction and what they're going to work on, all that kind of stuff. And then checking their work afterwards and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's no longer about me being an individual contributor anymore. I necessarily have to sort of do less myself and more. More delegate.
Like I said, more delegating to other people, and that was a very, very difficult thing for me to do. Like when I look back on that, I wish I would. I don't know if the title thing would have mattered because it was a small company, but some other title that was not CTO and just continued to be like super senior software developer. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
because I did senior. Love. Yeah, because I did love to code. Like I love coding. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy building things. Right.
Did you start? How did you start to think? Because that sounds maybe not quite CTO, but very much an architect type role, right?
Yep.
And so you've got the base framework where it's sort of you begin the application life cycle and it starts spinning out in all of these different ways. How did you come to terms with, or how did you start to understand the requirements of communicating requirements? Like how did you start to see that, and did you have philosophies around it?
Well, I would actually say a lot of that didn't come till later. Like I'm very willing to admit that I found that job just because, like I said, I was at the time, I was still very young. I enjoyed being a developer, and I found that job to be very, very stressful when I wasn't doing the things that I didn't enjoy doing, like doing the actual coding of stuff.
Yeah.
I felt like I was having less and less of an opportunity to do as time went on. So that distinction that you're making has actually occurred to me as time has went on, but unfortunately did not back then. I felt like I had to do everything in that role, right?
Yeah.
So I did eventually leave that company we were at, and I took a role at just a digital agency as just like a senior PHP developer was my title at the time.
Right.
And just with like the main goal being I wanted to get back to focusing in on doing the code kind of thing. Right. But what started to happen there a little bit was that, I mean, people kept seeing that I was doing a good job and, I know what I'm talking about. And similar to what Mark was saying, I guess the company you guys worked at, you start to sort of be pushed to, again,
right.
Yeah, to do more of that managerial type, delegation, team lead type thing.
And when somebody starts pushing you to that, you get really, you kind of get to this spot where you're like, well, if I say no to something, am I going to lose my job? Like, it really is a pressure situation that you've got to start coming to terms with. And
but it's also like maybe it's a little bit of self-confidence or cockiness perhaps, but I do feel like I know what I'm talking about. So like sometimes, so like when they're asking your opinion, or they want you to like lead a team, like you're like, you want to do that. You seem like it's obviously a good idea for me, right? Because
because I'm so smart.
Yeah, exactly. So
why wouldn't you want me to lead?
Of course, they want me to lead these teams, right? So
yeah.
So that's sort of what the struggle is, because like I feel like I should be able to be better at that delegation and stuff like that. But I still know that when it comes to coding, I feel like I'm just so good at that. And what I often think is that if I do have to delegate to somebody else, are they going to be able to do as good a job as I might think I'm going to be able to do?
Yeah.
Not to sound too cocky or anything like that. But that's often the process that goes through.
That is a huge fear when you are breaking off pieces, especially when they're important pieces. And you say, if this is not done right, we're going to have a big problem. And so I'd better do this. Except as you work on larger and larger projects, you have to take more of these pieces back. And then there's no time.
Exactly. It's just not possible.
Have you come up with any solutions for this? Because
to be honest, it's just I've just had to get more comfortable with doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think what I've sort of settled on, especially at the company I work at now, is that I just have to be willing to trust other people to like do a good job. And if they don't do a job, I'm more than willing to like, sit down with them, like go over with it and, help them come to a better solution. But you have to be willing to let that happen. Right.
Right.
Because you just can't do everything. It's just not possible, especially on those larger projects. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was thinking about a recent failure of mine regarding delegating. We're divided into back end team and front end team, and I'm the technical architect responsible for delivery of the whole project, but I kind of hand off the front end piece, and I didn't do a really great job I've just never been very into front end, and I've kind of let it slide, and it came back in bad shape, and it cost the project time. And that's a recent failure of mine. And I've got to sort of double down on relearning front end so that I can monitor the growth and direction but so that's part of the story of how we delegate and how we learn to let go of things. But also, I guess, what do you do when you fail, right? Like, when the project goes bad because you let something slide, and then you learn. And then you just learn. Like, I mean, I've definitely had lots of failures in my career, but as long as you learn from that, that's all that really matters. As much as it's super cliche to say, but it's true when it comes down to it, right? Sure. Yeah. So you're at this next agency. What were the things other than just? I mean, we didn't really talk about the factors that led you to leave. Was it really just I don't want to manage people anymore, I just want to jump and go? Or
I would say that was probably 75%.
Okay.
And I also wanted to just try doing new things. So like we were always working on the same, maybe it was different after I left, but we're always basically working on the same kinds of things. Like there wasn't much variation there. You're building landing pages or making changes to system to manage landing pages or something along those lines. So it was, there wasn't a lot of variation to what was being done. And the whole idea of like working in the agency, there'd be all kinds of different projects I could potentially work on as well. So that was also a huge plus to me as well.
Okay. And
I would actually add that same person that had called me to 2 jobs so far got a job at that place and also
called you to the third one. Okay. How long were you at so it was affiliate marketing and then affiliate marketing landing pages. How long were you at this one?
That was about I think it was like 3 years or something like that. Again, like it seemed like we just like grew out of nowhere, and I felt like I was there for longer, but when I look back on it, it really wasn't that long. It was like 3 years tops.
Did you leave before me?
Oh yeah. Wait, well, I don't know when you left, but
I guess so. I guess interesting. Okay, I thought that I left before. Anyways, so you went to the agency. You got to do a whole bunch of new stuff, and you started to learn about delegation in a little bit more of a formalized way. And how long were you there?
I would say it helped because they were actually they weren't a large company, but they were larger. And I would say they were far more structured in the way they did things, which is something that actually helped me a lot. Like it really, I would say one thing when I look back, I'm not sure how we actually did anything at the company we worked at, is that they had a very, formal, design specification. This is how we're going to do things and all that kind of thing. Yeah. I had never done any of that kind of stuff. Just seeing the way that they incorporated into like the project pipeline was amazing. I was like, wow, this is such a good idea. Why wasn't I doing this? This is great stuff.
Yeah. As opposed to walking in, pointing at the screen and going, move this number over here. Yeah. Right. Or like, this number has to be a 5.
It just made so much. It made so much sense to me. And especially when you're planning for those things in advance, when it comes time to develop stuff, you have the plan there.
Yeah.
That place was a great learning experience for me.
Right.
Unfortunately, they quickly went out of business not long after.
So that was my first exposure to wireframes, was when I went to Click.
Yeah.
And wireframes and sort of statements of work, and is what, and these are designs that we're going to do. And so coming out of wow, doesn't everybody do that? Why doesn't everybody do this? And so okay, so the first agency you went to went out of business, and did you go down with the ship on that one?
No, so I got out a little bit beforehand. They let a whole bunch of people go at one point, and there was not a lot of faith in the founder of the company. Mm-hmm. There was a feeling that some poor deals were made as time goes on, and we were just like, it wasn't looking good.
Yeah.
So a guy I worked with at that company, he decided to go off on his own and start his own agency.
Okay.
And he was like, hey, Shane, and this is a different guy this time. He was like, hey, Shane, do you want to, I mean, you seem like you're a competent developer. Do you want to start doing this kind of thing with me? So I went and I quit that company and started working for him.
Okay. So this is your second agency now, fourth startup?
Yep. So it was just me and him. It was just the two of us at the beginning.
Okay.
And it was great. Like it was probably he took care of all the business type stuff, but there was definitely like a constant stream of work that we had to work on. I mean, we grew into like a relatively large company. This place I was at for about, I think it was about 7 years, 6, 7 years. Yeah, it was quite a bit up until this, the place I'm at right now. And this is where I was at when we popped into your guys' office for a while.
Yeah.
And we got to work on all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of like simple WordPress type stuff. There was a bunch of just like, there was web applications. We did native applications. This is where I started to get more into the server side of things a little more, that I had touched on a little bit, but not significantly until I started working at this company. And that's where I actually started to really find a way that I can really contribute to a development team in a more broader, better way. Because this is when I started getting into DevOps. I'm not sure if you know that's what I do now. Like I basically do DevOps.
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know. So are you doing cloud DevOps on AWS or?
Well, I guess when people say DevOps, there's two sides of it, obviously, right? There's
the Jenkins side of things.
So at that point, I was doing everything at that agency I was working on for. And it started with like the Jenkins type thing, because at the previous company, I had met a guy who exposed me to Jenkins. And I was like, wow, this is crazy amazing, this thing. You just click a button and it deploys it for you.
And it does it. Yeah.
Super awesome. I actually built my own continuous integration at the next company I worked at first, because when it comes down to it, I mean, all Jenkins is like a glorified like script
runner. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's not doing, I mean, it's got a lot of nice bells and whistles to organize it for you. But eventually I did switch to Jenkins, but I just thought that was like the bee's knees. It was so amazing. Like, don't need to, SSH into a server or FTP files over. I just click a button and,
and it does everything. Yeah.
Especially when you're at an agency, when I don't even know how many web projects we worked on, but it must have been like hundreds. So just being able to deploy all of them easily, it was so amazing.
Yeah. I had a similar feeling the first time I started using it. It really, there were projects where I had to RDP into the live production server, and my manager at the time said, "Oh yeah, so what we do for our production server is we right click our background and we set it to red." So
it's not a bad idea.
It's not the worst idea, but it's not as good as click a button and Jenkins does everything for you. But yeah, so that was our system, and it was like, oh, you copy the files over and and then but it's red, so you know that it's dangerous, and and then so coming from that to your first exposure to Jenkins is just night and day. It's like a different world. And nowadays we've got Jenkins compiles it and then sends it out into AWS, and it just deploys into a new system. Or how far along into DevOps are you?
I think I'm, my technical title, I believe, is like, I believe it, what is it again? Sorry, I've always been terrible at titles my entire career. Yeah. It's not something
CTO.
Yeah, exactly. It's like but I basically lead the DevOps teams at team at the company I work at. So we built, there's the actual DevOps side of things where it's all about, developer operations. It's, helping, developers, deploy their applications to internal environments, checking that their code is good code. So there's a whole bunch of, steps in that. So we run things through, we compile it, run all the tests, run it through Sonar Cube for like code quality issues, stuff like that. Run it through another tool that looks for security vulnerabilities in the application. Just like usually it's based on dependency type stuff. So, if your application uses, some terrible version of a library, it'll say, hey, just so you know, there's like this massive security vulnerability that, maybe you should upgrade or something like that.
Upgrade. So now actually let's take it back and set the stage a little more, because there are already a few things that I want to drill into. We'll finish up at the agency that you effectively founded. How big did they get by the time you left?
So they were probably about 40 or so by the time I left, I would say.
So you went 2 to 40.
Yep.
Yeah. And still doing well, and you just wanted to...
Well, just event. So we went up to 40, and then we kind of dropped down pretty significantly, I would say. So it was getting down to the end, and there was maybe... There'd be times where I'd go into the office and it was just me, actually.
Right.
So it like probably went down to like 5 or so. Yeah. There is a lot of reasons that went into that. Not all on the technology side that caused it to happen, but things were not really looking good. And I hung around for a while because I had been there for quite a while, kind of thing. But I eventually I felt it was time for me to move on to something else.
To something else. What sorts of things so if I was at an agency like this, you said there were lots of things that happened. What sorts of things would I watch out for to, what sorts of things brought it down?
So we were talking about like SOWs and stuff like that. Yep. I would say that based on the people that we had hired, we were not charging enough in a lot of situations.
Right. Okay.
That was kind of like a big one to me. We had a couple projects that just did not go well. That obviously hurts as well. But to me, that was always the biggest issue, is that
undercharging.
Or
misestimation even, right?
Well, I wouldn't even say it was misestimation. Like a lot of the times it was just like looking at, like, I know how much I make as an example. I mean, I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, I think. So I can do the math as to, how much they're paying me as an hour, just as a minimum, like not including obviously the office costs money, insurance, all these other things that I don't have to worry about. And it just, the numbers didn't add up to me. Like, how could we be charging this? Sure. Right. I'm sure it got us lots of projects, but I mean, you look at other agencies and they're probably charging like $200 an hour, probably more. Like, I'm sure Click charges a lot of money.
Easily. I'm not sure exactly what the rate card is. And if I went ahead and said that on stream, I would be in more trouble than I'm already in for doing a podcast. So I won't say, but our customers know what the rate card is.
But overall, I just always thought it was not enough, and I never thought it was just sustainable kind of thing. So when we did have projects that did not go well, it just made things all
House of Cards.
Exactly.
House of Cards fell down. That's okay. And so you're at the point you're deciding to go. You have done a bit of DevOps. What attracts you to the place that you're in now, and how did you look for that? How did you what happened?
So again, Ed, you'll find this to be, I'm sure you're finding this to be a common thread through my career. So somebody called me up that had worked at, so where I'd worked at last agency, it was kind of actually a really interesting situation where we had the agency that I worked at, and then there was also a staffing agency that was sort of like a sister company to us.
Okay.
Like we were in the same office. The two owners were like, had known each other for years kind of thing. So there was, often like they would help us find developers to come on board to like help us do projects. Sometimes the companies they were working with, they didn't just want a developer, they wanted somebody to do it. So they would pass the projects over to us.
Yeah.
But one of the guys that worked over there, he was like a HR type person, I guess.
Yep.
And he had left at one point. I was actually on vacation. I came back and he was gone. I was like, what happened here?
Yeah.
But he just messaged me on Facebook one day. This wasn't something I was good friends with or anything like that. The previous guy I had hung up with a lot. We were pretty good friends for a long time. But this guy, I barely knew him. But he messaged me, hey, I work at this company now. Are you interested in checking us out? I went to the website. Seemed like they were interesting place to work. It's called Identos. And I looked them up online, and their office is literally a 2-minute walk from where I live.
Fantastic.
So that is
far cry from Markham, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My current one, it wasn't downtown. I had to go to the East End. So it was like an hour to work-ish on the streetcar all the way across College Street. But this was literally steps away. And that was huge to me. And it was the role was DevOps, which is something that I just started to do more and more and more.
Yeah.
So I decided, let's give it a shot. And went over and was hired, and that was it.
Yeah. And was it Jenkins from day one? Like, how did you start to move into, how did this role change for you now then? Because you've been programmer, bit of DevOps, and
it just sort of became, since as we started to hire people at that agency, we needed a place to host a lot of the stuff, or just set up staging environments for this stuff all the time. That was always the biggest thing, is being able to set up an environment to be able to show a client, this is what we're working on, this is the progress that's being made, et cetera, et cetera. So that was always the thing that made me want to just have these tools. Like, it wasn't necessarily that I was trying to get into DevOps. It's like, we had a problem that we need to solve.
Yeah.
Here, Jenkins is going to allow us to solve this. So I gave it a shot kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just started doing it more and more and more. You started, if a new project came on board, we had Jenkins' job, just like, set up the whole Git repository, set up the staging environment, get it all running very nicely. And it was just something I started to, read up about more and more and more as time went on. And it seemed like it was pretty cool. I was doing more system administration stuff as well, just because we had other developers, and I mean, I just had the knowledge at the time, so I would just be the person that did it. And I don't know, I found myself enjoying it quite a bit. I did do that quite a bit at the company we worked at until we hired somebody to do it. But I don't know, I fell in love with Bash and Linux servers, and
Okay. And so now you're doing DevOps at the new place. You've already said one technology. You said Sonar Cubes. What is that? Because I've never heard of this.
So it's basically used for code quality analysis. So there are lots of code smells that, as I'm sure as an architect, you're reviewing people's code that, just can stand out as obvious to you. Like I would say developers don't make these kinds of mistakes, but these are very often, these are just sort of examples, like condition statements where, one part of the condition is just never going to be executed because it's always going to be false. That's an example, right? Or this chunk of code is never going to be executed. Or you duplicated this whole chunk of code a bunch of times and it could lead you to refactoring the code somehow. Right. Or maybe it's you've imported this library, but you're never actually using it anywhere. So all those kinds of things. And it's pretty good at what it can identify. Like, I think the case that I just gave are pretty obvious ones, but it does have language specific bindings as well. Where if, let's say, you're using a function that is deprecated, it'll say, hey, you should probably change this because this is a deprecated function. It's going to go away sometime soon. It's a really, really handy tool.
That sounds really, I think it was Kai. I think I was talking with Kai about the analyze option in Visual Studio, where it looks up things like, and I'm going to try and say it again, but it was cyclomatic complexity. And so what that is like the number of lines of code and the depth of your if statements and things, and just the largest block of a function. And so all of these things, it says, there's something wrong with this, maybe, where this is really hard to understand and it will be more expensive long-term and so it sounds like Sonar Cube detects things like that as well, where it's
before, so if like you're the architect reviewing it, it doesn't even need to get to you yet because the developer's got the feedback and they see it and they're like, oh, I should fix this before I
get yelled at. Yeah. Or coached.
Yeah, coached. Yeah,
coached.
That's right. It's super, super handy tool.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I will look into that going forward.
But I was sort of given at this company, like I was given the opportunity to do DevOps from it was going to be my focus at this company. Like, sure, I was doing it at that agency a bit, but I was building a DevOps. Like, they didn't have anybody doing DevOps at that point, so I was coming in to build the department kind of thing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So
you're building the department, and you went and you selected this thing, Sonar Cube, and said, we're just going to run this for our developers. How many developers are you? I don't know. I guess you're providing a service for them, right? You're providing their hosting.
In some cases, hosting. Like the hosting, I would say, is more often just for the QA side of things to take a look at. Like
dev hosting. Or internal hosting.
Yeah, they have their own. I assume they're running things on their computer to test things out. I would assume most of the time, and after they've done it, they deploy their work through our DevOps pipeline, and it gets deployed into Kubernetes, and then the QA can take a look at it and.
Okay, so you are working on Kubernetes, because we talked about that with Jordan. Jordan and I spoke about Kubernetes, and how now did you select Kubernetes yourself?
So it was kind of funny, actually. So Docker had been around for a while at this point. So I started working at this company. I'll be 3 years in June. But Docker had been around for a while, and I was actually very anti-Docker for a very, very long time.
Oh my gosh!
I felt that the problems it was solving, and I find this with a lot of technologies, is that the problems it was solving were not problems that I ever really had. One of the great advantages of Docker is that, it's always running on this, it's, where it's running. So you don't need to worry about those kinds of things. But that's never a problem. It's not like I was deploying my code to just like random servers on the internet.
Right. You've never had that. I remember Docker when it was like pre 1.0 and I was like, oh my God, I need this in my life right now. But I was going from a space where I had to RDP onto the red desktop, right? Like it was like, no, wait, I don't have to do any of that. I just said, this is my machine.
But Docker doesn't solve that necessarily for you though either, right? Like, cause you still have to get the Docker, image on. And again, so that's just another reason why I wasn't like super sold on it.
Yeah.
In the end, what did it for me was just the portability of the Docker container. It's easy to move around that whole unit of code to different places, right?
Right.
But
right.
I came into this company, like I had heard about Docker. I was kind of anti it. But this first project that they wanted me to come on board for was they wanted to deploy some applications using Docker on something, and it was sort of left to me as to what to use. Yeah. I had heard rumblings of Kubernetes at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, it was really that or Docker Swarm was the option.
Yeah.
But I was like,
I thought it was Docker Orchestrate. Is that another?
I believe Docker Orchestrate is something else. There is there's a few Docker specific tools to orchestrate containers.
Yeah.
But I was given the option and I had heard good things about Kubernetes. So I was like, let's give it a shot, I guess.
Okay. And so do you have experience in setting up the bare metal of Kubernetes across, or are you running a managed Kubernetes service?
So I do have experience doing that. It's not something that I necessarily say, hey, client X, I'm going to deploy Kubernetes for you. This is how I'm going to do it.
Right.
That first customer that I came in for that we need to set up Kubernetes to run our application, it was an on-premise application. We deal in healthcare a lot. Yeah. So, they don't want to run stuff in the cloud. So and our applications, we've said Kubernetes is our platform. That means I have to get Kubernetes running on their, on-premise set of virtual machines kind of thing. And to be honest, I mean, I know it's much simpler now, but it actually wasn't that hard at the time.
Yeah.
We had enough obviously we couldn't auto scale or any of that fancy stuff that you could do with a managed provider, but it was pretty straightforward to set up.
Yeah.
Our actual company's internal Kubernetes, like we have a few Kubernetes networks, but the main one we use for dev is not a managed one. We use a tool called Kops.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but
I have not.
The main reason was since we're a Canadian company and we work in healthcare, we didn't necessarily want to deploy stuff to the cloud in US East AWS as an example. And the Kubernetes managed service at the time was not available in Canada.
Okay.
This is still pretty early on. So we're like, let's use Kops. And we've used that to this day for our development environment. And I'm a big fan of it actually. Yeah. But any customer environment, I always tell them, yes, use a managed Kubernetes service.
Right.
It makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Especially because if you're not some place that has a lot of Kubernetes experience, that's going to be a much, safer arena for you to play in kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because again, like that first client that we had that was a hospital, they certainly did not have Kubernetes experience.
No.
So the more managed hospitals like that a lot better.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're doing this DevOps stuff, and is there anything else that's particularly pressing in terms of the things that you want to talk about in this space in terms of your career progression? Like, is there anything else we've missed?
No, that's basically, so this is at the company I'm at now. We've grown quite a bit since then. Like, I think I joined as employee number maybe 20 or something like that, and we're about 40 now. There's been some people that have left between since I've been there, so I believe I'm actually the sixth senior person there at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, we have like a DevOps department now where we have other people working under me that do DevOps. Yeah.
And is it's an agency for hospitals, or is it?
No. So we build tools to help handle authentication and authorization of resources that people may want to share with third parties. So our technology is very behind the scenes. You don't really see it that much. Like we do a lot with a good example is like, I always give this example. You go to Facebook as an example, you sign up to a Facebook app. When you try and log into that app, they're like, hey, this app is requesting permission to your picture, your name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we build technology like that to help connect sources of information that you may have access to, but they may not all necessarily be connected.
Right. So like an SSO, a single sign-on type of thing.
Well, you can use it for SSO, but let's say as an example, like COVID, this is not something we're doing right now by any means, but with COVID-19 as an example, people are getting immunized, right?
Yeah.
You could assume possibly that at some point people are going to want proof that you have been vaccinated, right? I mean, they haven't said that's actually going to happen now, but it seems like that's something that is probably going to happen in some way at some point.
Yeah.
So the government obviously has a repository of everybody that has, been vaccinated, and we would be able to build a system that, as some service that required that vaccination information, you could authorize that service to pull your vaccination records to be able to make that validation.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And you can extend that to other health records. It's for just being able to share your resources with you being at the center of the consent to share them to other parties.
Right. Okay. So that's pretty interesting. Now, one of the other thing, I guess, so if we're at the point where we're talking about the broader scope of working as a developer, you've spent a lot of time as a hiring manager. And what are some of the things that you would want candidates to do better at, or what things do you look for? What advice from a hiring manager should people take on?
Well, as I was saying earlier, to me, work experience, two things: work experience, and then working on the things that we are going to want you to be working on, or demonstrate the knowledge of the things that we want you to work on. So we put an ad on Indeed. Let's say this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. We want to make sure that if a candidate is going to come, they want to be able to speak to those things specifically. So when I'm going through resumes as an example, I'm looking for that that matching up of what we want and what's on the resume, and that may seem obvious, of course, that's what we're going to look for. But I often find that once we get past the resume review process and we get to the actual whether it's our first sort of meet and greet process, or the well, actually, let me just start explaining the process that at least we're using currently for bringing people on. So let's say we get a bunch of resumes, we filter them down to the ones we want to talk to. First, we have a very short interview where it's basically just like a meet and greet type thing where we say, this is what Identos does. Tell me about yourself. And then what we do is we ask a relatively simple technical question.
Yeah.
That's one, to get an idea of, their knowledge, their sort of general IT knowledge, and two, just how they're going to explain it. We ask them, when you go to google.com and you press enter, what happens? Like, what's happening behind the scenes, right?
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of things are happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
If they have no idea, obviously that's a thumbs down kind of thing. But just the way they answer the question and the things they talk about can be very, very telling. Because if you're a developer, certainly there's areas that you're more familiar with. Like maybe you're going to talk about how Chrome is going to render the page, or how the HTTP protocol works. If you're somebody on the more DevOps or system inside, maybe you're going to talk about DNS caching or something, or TCP handshakes and stuff like that. But it's mostly just about how they answer the question that we're looking for. So after that interview, we have a second one that's a little more technical, and the detail of this one depends on exactly what the role is. It's different if it's a front-end developer or a QA analyst or somebody for DevOps. But we do ask a battery of questions, and those battery of questions are not super tech. We're not asking what tool do you use in this situation? How does this function work, as an example? general knowledge about stuff that they've said on the resume that they have knowledge in. So as an example, if I'm interviewing a front-end developer and they say they have a knowledge of React, let's say, right?
Yep.
And maybe they have some Angular experience too. I'll ask them to compare and contrast Angular and React. What do you like? What do you like about one? What do you like about the other one? I don't care about what libraries or exactly how you structure a component or anything like that.
Yeah.
I want to know that person is comfortable talking about the tools that they say they know, kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's always a really, really big thing for me, because if somebody says on their resume they got a lot of experience with something and they can't talk confidently about it, or maybe not talk confidently, but have strong opinions about it. I'm always very, very much of the mind that people should have strong opinions about the technologies they choose to use. Like they didn't just pick it out of a hat kind of thing. Like they use React because they like React. They use this cloud provider because they like this cloud provider, and can give good reasons as to why that is.
Right. Okay. So I think that seems like solid advice in terms of somebody looking for a job should be able to speak to the things that are actually on their resume.
But you'd be surprised that that's definitely not always the case. I would say lots of times it's not. Like you get them in, you start asking about stuff that's on the resume, and they have no idea. I actually, and this blows my mind to this day. There was this one guy years ago. It'll stick in my mind forever. He had this thing on his resume, and I asked him about it, and he just straight up to me said, "No, I didn't do that." And I was like, one, why did you put it on your resume then?
Yeah.
Two, why didn't you just fake it? Like come up with a story or something, not just bold-faced lie to me that it's something that I've done. That's just absolutely crazy. But just ask you about the stuff that's on the resume. It does a good job of whittling down the people that you're not looking for.
Right. Okay.
So beyond that, then we do have sort of a practical section where, again, depending on what they do, we ask them usually two things. One, because this is, as long as they're somebody on the technical side of things, they should be able to do this day and age, is we ask them to deploy a web server. Just like the goal is to be able to open up your browser and see hello world or something like that. You can use any technology you want. You can use any language you want. You can have Google open the background. Doesn't matter. But can you show me hello world in the browser?
Right.
And because it's something that you do in just about any language these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're writing C or C++ or something like that.
Yeah.
It should be pretty short. And that's something that a lot of people have been unable to do, even with having Google open in the background kind of thing.
Right.
Like it sounds like you're doing some front end stuff right now. Like if you do npm create what's it called? There's
but you do an Express server.
Project. Do one of those code generator things that does it for you. That's fine with me. I'm not asking it to build a web server from scratch or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that trips a lot of people up actually. But it's that. And then there's usually another question that's a little more practical to what they're doing, but we definitely don't do any of those, whiteboarding that I hear you talking about a lot. Those tricky questions. How, what's the most, how do you do this binary tree lookup thingamabob kind of thing?
Reverse a binary tree on a whiteboard. Yeah.
Yeah. I will never ask a question like that because unless you're at a company that's, again, it goes back to, asking them about what we're going to need them to do. The chances of you needing somebody to do anything like that these days is so minuscule. I've worked a lot of companies now and I've never had to do anything like that.
Yeah. I think these are the things that happen at Google interviews, and they are really trying to bias their hiring process in favor of people with very strong computer science backgrounds, right? And so it serves a purpose because that's the type of engineer that they're looking for. But anyway,
I sometimes question that though. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the role, but I find it hard to believe that the majority of engineers that go into Google are working on the problems where that is relevant. I could be wrong.
Right.
I think there absolutely is a certain set where that is.
Yeah.
But I find it hard to believe that that's the majority of
with the number of engineers that they have, some of them are actually just moving boxes around on screens.
100%. It's what we all do it. Made up your mind, but we've all moved lots of boxes around screens. That did not require a computer science degree. Yeah.
Make the box purple. That's the job. Okay, so I guess two things I think we're closing in on wrap up time anyways, but what are your biggest current challenges or things that you're I probably have three questions actually, things that you're trying to solve right now, like what's really driving your current practice?
I would say like me personally is what you're asking, or I would say, because I would add with this last company I worked at, this is the first place where it has not been PHP based. Like every single job that I've worked at till now, it has always been PHP, or I've one of the first people there, so I get to choose the technology, and I like PHP, so it's going to be PHP for everybody. But this is the first place where I went to where that is not the case. Like they have a very strong technical team. It's all Java based actually, which is also another language that I was not a fan of for a long time. Yeah. But getting better at the whole Java ecosystem, because like in all these different languages, there's once you start scratching the surface, there's a lot of knowledge there that's very specific to that language's paradigm, the way they do things. Yeah. To get getting a better understanding of how they do things in the Java context, as well as a lot more things in the more security side of things. Like I've been like to this day, I've never gone for any kind of certification or anything like that. The only thing I have at this point is my George Brown diploma, computer programmer analyst on the wall, and I may start actually trying to get some of those security ones, because especially when you're starting to work in healthcare, when they like there's these things called, and I'm not sure if you guys ever had to do them where you were working before, but like technical risk analysis or privacy impact assessments type things. Did you guys ever have to do those?
We have a team. I have not personally done them, but we do have a team that does them. And I mean, I've done internal HIPAA training with health protocol stuff to make sure that your boss doesn't go to jail. But and
we're also going for things like ISO certification. So there becomes a lot of stuff where getting those certifications helps the company out quite a bit, because you can only say that Shane has lots of experience to a point, right? Yeah. Like it's gotten to the point now where, you kind of really want to have those certifications, because when people start looking into your company, if you're dealing with healthcare information, stuff like that, they want to be able to say, oh, this person as proof they've been trained in X, Y, and Z kind of thing. It becomes very,
and he hasn't done, and he isn't just making this up. He has accredited security, and security is a big deal. So you're moving towards security right now. How long do you see yourself? Maybe this is not an appropriate question, but do you see yourself in 5 years still pursuing this? Or are there other things that you see on the horizon that you're really interested in?
I think that's probably going to be my focus between that and just like getting more knowledgeable with like the Java ecosystem, those two things. Because like the DevOps thing, like I think we have a really good practice at Identus right now with the way we do DevOps. There's some little things I'd like to tweak here and there, I guess. But a lot of the times what we do is we help our customers install our products as well. And that's where having that kind of training comes in very handy, because they also know that, Identus has people certified in that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so you would be a certified security guy setting up a system in a hospital where they're hypersensitive about security. And so there's a lot of value to that. Okay. I think I said I had three. How do you do professional development then? I mean, you certainly have a handful of things that you're interested in pursuing. Have you scheduled this stuff, or do you
I plan to do it over like the next year or so, I would say. Like, it's definitely not something that's like right in front of me, but it's definitely a goal of mine over the next while. But I would say, as far as professional development, like, I used, like, going back to how we sort of started talking a lot about this stuff, like I still very much try and keep my skills sharp as far as that individual contributor go. Like, as much as my job right now is DevOps, especially in DevOps in 2020, 2021, programming is a big part of it. So I still try and do a lot of development, even if that development is just like building my own tools to help me do things better, kind of thing.
Right.
So that's something that is very important for me to keep up on, because if I ever get to the point where, not even that, I have to delegate because I can't do it because I don't know how, that would drive me crazy. I have to, got to have that knowledge.
Right. So you're programming right now, and are you programming in Java now?
No, actually, I do my own stuff in PHP still. Okay. I found a way to sneak it into this company a little bit.
Yeah, very good, very good. One of the things. So, just recently, I was looking at a thread on Reddit about how DoorDash selected Kotlin, the Java. New Java, as their back end language, and there was a long article, and people said, "Well, why didn't even look at C#?" And somebody mentioned something in Java that I had never heard of called JFC, which is Java Flight Control, and this works together with JMC, which is Java Mission Control. And it was because they said something like, does C# have JFC for the JMC for the JVM? And
Java's got, so that's one of the things, but like Java is like this whole world of stuff that has been built specifically around Java.
Right.
Like, people talk about vendor lock-in, like it's just like ecosystem lock-in with a lot of this Java stuff.
So the JFC, have you heard of JFC?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, let me tell you, because first thing I said after, what the bleep is this? I Googled JFC, and it is like the coolest thing. It's a profiler, a memory profiler that runs on your servers so that when things go wrong, you can come in, and because it's a low resource consumption full-time system, like a full system profiler. Something goes wrong, you've got a full stack trace, you've got the full picture of what's going on in memory. It's all on like these pretty little graphs and things. If you have not heard of this, look it up. It, especially from a DevOps perspective, if you're running this JFC and JMC, I think, is another piece of the profiling puzzle. If you're running both of these things on the servers, when things start to go wrong, they're crashing or whatever's happening, your developers can just hop in and they can see the full stack trace, the full memory profile, and everything that was happening at the time that the exception happened, because this thing just ticks along, and it's interesting. So cool. And I do not know that exists for any other platform. I started asking the C# team.
I would have thought .NET would have something like that, because I know it's got, because I know there's a lot of parallels between Java and C#, as is my understanding, at least. I would have thought that there's some Windows component that would let you do that, but maybe that's not the case.
I mean, the closest I've found is I think there's a product called Datadog, which works for many different platforms, but my understanding from what I was looking at was there is nothing like Java Flight Control for, at least for C#, and quite possibly anything else. I tweeted at David Fowler, the guy who is the architect of C# .NET Core. I'm talking to the people who are the center of C#, and they're like, maybe somebody else knows. I don't. So it's like, anyway,
you got me interested. It's something I'm definitely going to look up for sure.
That's something that you really should look up because it is cool beans. I'm telling you that. I wish it made me reconsider Java as a waste of time. It is no longer potentially the single worst language that exists. It could be the second worst.
Yeah, definitely not my first. Although you did mention Kotlin, I do like it with Kotlin how it's like you can drop in a Kotlin class in the middle of a Java project and you're good to go. That's pretty cool. I do like Kotlin. It's a little more loosey goosey, more like PHP than straight Java.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think of it as, Java, but by JetBrains or JetBeans or whatever their name is. And I suppose it's a Java that isn't run by Oracle, so it's probably better. But I don't know. What do I know? I don't know.
That's a good selling point to me. Yeah, I'm still, like I said, I'm scratching the surface on this Java stuff. Like I'm by no means an expert in it. We have a lot of very, very smart Java developers that can know both these things better than I.
And they fine tuning the JVM is something apparently that's important. I don't know anything about, but for you, flight control, look it up. I think it'll bring great joy to your team if your servers are just running that by default. I think we're probably. How is your life outside of your career? How are things going?
Oh, good. I mean, I still work a lot, but I've always enjoyed what I do, so that's not been that much of a problem for me.
Yeah,
I would say the whole COVID thing. I mean, I stuck around the house a lot, so it wasn't really a huge difference for me either.
Yeah.
Although I had been going to the office for a long, for quite a while. But for one of those agencies I worked at, especially at the beginning, I did a lot of work from home stuff, and I actually did get sick of it after a while.
Yeah.
I think I was doing it for like maybe a year and a half or something like that. And then I started going in the office all the time. But I don't know, this time around, I mean, where am I going to go? So
yeah. No, I get it. Do you have your first shot yet?
No, unfortunately, I do not. I am too young.
Too young.
Yeah, or not in the right postal code.
Okay. Well, that's an upside. I have my first shot, and it was postal code and age related, so I got it on too fast.
So this is why you're into .NET so much.
Because I'm so old.
No, it's get the vaccine, Bill Gates.
Oh yes, right. I'm transmitting in 5G now. Anyways, I think that we've. Is there anything else that you would want to?
No. No, I think I'm good.
All right.
Thanks for pulling it all out of me, making me reminisce over my career over the last couple of days.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up then. And thank you so much for participating.
No problem.
I think this will be good. All right. Thanks. Here we go. Bye.
Bye.